Most people think the worst thing a family can do to you is cause you physical harm. They're wrong. The worst thing is when they steal the only thing that was truly yours, something born from your mind, your hands, your sleepless nights, and then expect you to applaud them for it. My brother built his entire career on work that came from me. My parents held the door open for him. This is the story of how I closed it. The Addams family had 2 children, but if you looked at the wall of their living room, you would have thought only one of us existed. Dylan's photographs covered every centimeter of that hallway. Graduation cap thrown into the air. Internship badge pinned to a freshly ironed shirt. Employee of the quarter plaque held in both hands. Camera-ready smile. There was exactly one photo of me, tucked near the coat closet like an afterthought. 9th grade science fair. I had built a neural network classifier from scratch, and I was holding the first place ribbon with the expression of someone who couldn't quite believe it was real. Nobody in my family had understood the project. Nobody had asked. Our house sat on a quiet street in the kind of Midwestern residential neighborhood where neighbors wave from their porches and measure success by which of their children gets mentioned first in the parish newsletter. My father, Richard, 54, a retired mechanical engineer, ran the household the way he had once run a production floor, with budgets, deadlines, and the final word, always. My mother, Diane, 52, kept the garden immaculate and loved both her children, only she loved one of them louder. And then there was Dylan, 27. Tall, easy smile, the kind of handshake that made older men nod with approval. Senior developer at Meridian Technologies, a Fortune 500 company 2 states away, engaged to a woman named Brooke who looked like she had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. My parents called him our star. And I was Angela Addams, 22. Final year at a mid-tier state university my parents had chosen because it was good enough. GPA of 3.95. Researching machine learning algorithms under the supervision of a professor who actually knew my name. At Sunday dinners, when I mentioned my research, my mother would smile that patient smile of hers and say, "How wonderful, sweetheart. Dylan, tell your father about the promotion." Let me tell you something about quiet people. We are not quiet because we have nothing to say. We are quiet because we are watching. And what I had been watching for years was what my brother was doing in the dark. The best thing about code is that it doesn't lie. 2 plus 2 is always 4. No amount of charm can convince it to be 5. My real life happened between midnight and 4 in the morning in the university computer lab, a windowless room on the 3rd floor of Wireacre Hall that smelled of cold coffee and overheating processors. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, one of them blinking in a rhythm I had memorized like a heartbeat. I would sit at the same terminal with my headphones on and disappear into the architecture of an algorithm the way some people disappear into prayer. That semester, I was building something I was genuinely proud of. An adaptive optimization algorithm for large-scale data processing that could learn from its own errors and recalibrate in real time. I had been developing it for nearly 2 years, version after version, each one more precise than the last. Every iteration lived in my private repository with annotated timestamps. Mine. Entirely mine. My academic advisor, Dr. Ella Marsh, was 58 years old, silver-haired, and allergic to surface-level conversation. The first time she reviewed my code, she lowered her reading glasses and looked at me over the frames. "This is graduate-level work, Addams. Why are you here?" My parents said this university was good enough. She didn't respond for a long moment. Then she handed me a brochure. Thick paper. Embossed shield. A university in Washington, D.C., that I had only ever seen in rankings I scrolled past quickly because dreaming about it felt like a waste. "Apply," she said. "You deserve a place that sees you." I put the brochure in my bag. I didn't tell anyone at home. My laptop was old and temperamental, so I kept cloud backups on the family shared drive, the one my father had set up years earlier for tax documents and vacation photos. At the time, I didn't know that backup was about to cost me everything and then give it all back. The first time Dylan stole from me, he called it borrowing. The second time, he called it collaborating. By the 5th time, he didn't call it anything at all. I was 16. Dylan, 21, was struggling to finish a graduate program in computer science at a good university 2 hours north. He called one evening, his voice loaded with panic. Angie, I need help. I have a final project due Friday and I'm drowning. Can you just explain your approach to that classification algorithm you built for the science fair? I didn't explain it. I wrote it. I sat on my bed with my laptop balanced on a textbook, writing code, while he dictated what his professor wanted. It took me 3 hours. He got an A. When I saw that grade on his refrigerator over Thanksgiving, something small and sharp turned in my chest. I thought you said you rewrote most of it, I told him. He smiled. I polished it a bit. I looked at my mother. She was drying a casserole dish. He's your brother, Angela. Family helps each other. That became the pattern. Dylan called late, always urgent. Could I explain this concept? Could I sketch out this framework? Could I just take a quick look at something? Each time he took a little more. Each time he said a little less. The night Dylan received his acceptance letter from Meridian Technologies, my father opened a bottle of cheap champagne in the kitchen. The cork hit the ceiling and left a mark that was probably still there. My mother cried with joy. I clapped and smiled. Nobody in that kitchen knew that the final project that secured Dylan's graduate degree, the one that caught Meridian's attention, ran on code I had written at 17 years old. In my experience, the first lie is always the most expensive. Not for the liar. For the person who forgives it. That was just the appetizer. The main course was 6 years away. The day I won the Coldwell Merit Scholarship, the competitive, research-based kind that professors write recommendation letters for, I called my mother from the lab. My hands were still shaking. Dr. Marsh had hugged me, which was roughly the equivalent of a standing ovation from anyone else. Mom, I won the scholarship. How wonderful, sweetheart. Oh, before I forget, Dylan is going to propose. Can you believe it? Brooke is just stunning. We're throwing a party next month. I need your help with the decorations. The week I presented my first research paper at a regional conference, 20 minutes of original work in front of real scientists who asked real questions. Nobody in my family was in the audience. That same week, the entire Adams family flew to see Dylan receive his Employee of the Quarter plaque at Meridian's regional office. There were photos. They arrived in the family WhatsApp group. I stopped expecting things after that. Not dramatically. No door slamming, no tearful confrontations. I simply reorganized my schedule in silence. Sundays became lab days. Holiday visits got shorter. I started spending more time with my data and less time at a table where my name was background noise. Nobody asked why. Dr. Marsh noticed. She was the kind of professor who read between lines the same way she read code, carefully with attention to what was missing. You stopped smiling, Adams. I stopped pretending. That afternoon, she handed me the same brochure, thicker paper this time, with a note stapled to the front. The transfer deadline is March 1st. You deserve a place that sees you. I put it in my desk drawer. I didn't throw it away. It was a Tuesday evening in February when the email arrived. Tuesdays are supposed to be boring. I was in the lab at 11 at night, debugging a subroutine when my inbox chimed. The sender was a name I didn't recognize. Marcus Webb. Subject line, quick question about your optimization paper. I opened it. Hi, Angela. I came across your working paper on adaptive optimization algorithms while researching a similar problem. Interesting work. I noticed some notable similarities with the core engine of Meridian Technologies' predictive analytics platform, developed by Dylan Adams. Did you collaborate on the approach? I'd love to know more about the shared methodology. Marcus Webb, Data Architect, Analytics. Ex-Meridian. My hands stopped over the keyboard. I read the email 3 times. Then I opened Meridian's public tech blog in another tab, typed Dylan's name, and loaded his author page. Photo. Title. For posts about his predictive analytics engine. I clicked the first one. The architecture diagram was mine. The optimization logic was mine. The variable names were different. He had changed them the way you change the font on a plagiarized essay. But the structure, the flow, the elegant recursion, I had spent 14 months perfecting. Mine. Every line. I opened the family cloud drive. I navigated to my project folder. I clicked the access history. 47 entries. 47 times Dylan had opened my files over the past 3 years. Timestamps from 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, weekends when I was away at conferences, holidays when I was sleeping down the hall. I sat in that lab for a long time. The fluorescent light blinked. The processors hummed. The coffee in my cup went cold. I didn't cry. I just did the math. 6 years of theft multiplied by everything he had built on top of it. 47 times. He had opened my files 47 times, and I had been sitting at his dinner table every Sunday passing him the salt. The next afternoon, I walked into Dr. Marsh's office with a printout of the access history and a face that must have looked like a closed fist. She read the pages without interrupting. Then she set them on the desk and folded her hands. "What do you want, Angela? Revenge or your future?" I wanted to say both. Instead, I said, "Can I have until Tuesday?" She almost smiled. "Tell me your plan." I did the math out loud for her. If I confronted Dylan now, my parents would close ranks and pull my tuition, my only financial lifeline. I would lose my apartment, my lab access, my final semester. I would blow up my own life to prove a point, and Dylan would keep his job, his title, and his story. My word against his. And in the Addams family, his word had always weighed more than mine. But if I waited, if I first applied for the transfer, secured a way out, and built my case properly, I could leave on my own terms, with somewhere to go. "The transfer deadline is March 1st, I said. "I know," Dr. Marsh said. "I already drafted your recommendation letter. I was waiting for you to ask." That night, I began organizing what I already had. My repository history, with timestamps that preceded Dylan's project submissions by months. My handwritten research notes, dated and cross-referenced. Email threads with Dr. Marsh discussing the algorithm's development. Everything existed. I just had to put it in order. Dr. Marsh sent her letter the next morning. 3 pages. She held nothing back. I submitted the transfer application on February 28th. Then I drove home and helped my mother chop vegetables for Sunday dinner. I sat across from Dylan, laughed at his jokes, and passed the bread. There is a kind of patience that looks like weakness. It isn't. It is the patience of someone who knows exactly when the bridge will hold their weight. 3 months of pretending are harder than people think. Not the lying, the smiling. From March to May, I attended every Sunday dinner. I nodded when Dylan talked about his projects. I said, "That's great," at all the right moments. I ate my mother's stew and complimented the seasoning and excused myself early, saying I needed to study. Meanwhile, Dylan grew bolder. In April, he casually mentioned a performance bonus, something about the analytics engine exceeding projections. He bought Brooke a ring. Not modest. My father let out a long whistle when he saw the photos. "Meridian's treating you well, son." Dylan shrugged the way people shrug when they want you to notice their new watch. In May, he announced that his team would be presenting the predictive analytics engine to Meridian's board of directors. If they approved the national expansion, in 2 years he could be vice president of engineering. Richard raised his glass. Diane's eyes filled with tears. One night in late May, my phone buzzed at 11:45.
"Dylan."
"Angie, quick question. Does the recursive optimization layer collapse if you push the dataset past 10 million entries, or does it self-correct?" He was asking me to explain code he claimed to have written. "It self-corrects," I said. "There's a buffer function in the third loop. It redistributes the load." Right, I knew that, just confirming." I hung up and added the call to my timeline. Date, duration, content. Not a recording, just a note. One more line in a document that was growing longer every week. June 1st, 6:22 in the morning. My phone screen lit up the dark room. The email bore a shield I had memorized from a brochure I had kept in my drawer for 8 months. "Dear Ms. Addams, we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance." I read it 3 times. Then I put the phone face down on my nightstand, looked at the ceiling, and let the dawn light slowly warm the room. I had my exit. I just needed the right moment to use it. I didn't know yet that Dylan was about to hand me that moment on a silver platter. It was mid-June. I had confirmed my enrollment at the Washington, D.C. University 2 days earlier, quietly from a coffee shop, no witnesses, no champagne. The transfer was sealed. My future was secured. All that remained was the departure. Then Dylan called with that particular sweetness in his voice he reserved for favors. Hey Angie, I need your help. The board presentation is in 3 weeks, and there's a section of the analytics engine I want to refine, the recursive layer. Remember we talked about that?
We talked about that.
As if we had built it together in a garage. As if it were ours. Which section? I asked, keeping my voice flat. He described every detail. Everything he listed was something I had coded between midnight and dawn in a lab he had never set foot in. He walked through it with the easy confidence of a man reading from a script someone else had written. Sure, Dylan, I can take a look. You're the best, Angie. Seriously, I owe you. I sat very still for about 30 seconds after I hung up. Then I opened the timeline document on my laptop and typed, June 14th. Dylan requested help understanding the recursive optimization layer of the analytics engine he claims to have written. Duration, 22 minutes. Could not explain the buffer function without guidance. I helped him. I smiled while doing it. And I added a new line to the document that was going to end him. A few days later, I stopped by my parents' house to return a dish my mother had lent me months earlier. Dylan's car was in the driveway, which surprised me. He rarely visited on weekdays unless he wanted something. He was in the kitchen drinking my father's good bourbon from a coffee mug like it was water. He looked loose, relaxed, the particular looseness of someone who believes they are untouchable. Angie, good timing, he said, leaning against the counter. I've been thinking about the board presentation. This is going to change everything. If they approve the national expansion of the algorithm, in 2 years I could be VP of engineering. VP, Angie. At 28. He swirled the bourbon. Dad cried when I told him. He actually cried. I poured myself a glass of water. Drank it slowly. That's incredible, Dylan. Your algorithm must really be something special. He didn't hear the trap. Why would he have? Nobody had ever laid one for him. Oh, it is. You know me. Once I get into a problem, I don't let go. He laughed, tossed his keys in the air, caught them. They jingled with a bright, careless sound. The recursive layer alone took me, 8 months to crack. 14, I said. It took 14 months. He paused for just a fraction of a second.
Right.
But who's counting? I know, I said. I really do. He finished the bourbon, rinsed the mug, gave me a pat on the shoulder on his way out. His cologne lingered after the door closed, something woody and expensive, purchased with bonuses earned from my work. I stood alone in the kitchen and added his words to my notes. Dylan claimed full authorship of the algorithm. June 17th. Referenced the recursive layer as his own work. Did not mention my involvement. There is a particular kind of silence that arrives the night before you change your life. It sounds like crickets and a blinking cursor. Thursday night. My room was already a ghost of itself. Bare walls. Bed stripped. 11 sealed boxes stacked against the wall like brown paper soldiers. I sat cross-legged on the floor with my laptop balanced on a box labeled books, heavy, and opened the draft email one last time. 2 recipients. Meridian Technologies Corporate Compliance. The Academic Integrity Committee of Dylan's Graduate University. Subject: Formal Complaint. Misrepresentation of intellectual property and academic fraud. Attachments: a 46-page annotated timeline. A side-by-side code comparison. Cloud access logs with timestamps, 47 entries. And a signed letter from Dr. Marsh affirming my authorship. It was clean. Professional. The kind of document that doesn't shout. It just sits there and waits for someone to read it. I didn't press send. Not yet. First the Friday dinner. First the family table. One last chance for them to see me, hear me, choose correctly. I called Dr. Marsh. She answered on the second ring, which meant she had been waiting. I'm ready, I said. A pause. Then, in that calm, steady voice, Angela, whatever happens tomorrow, remember that you earned everything that comes next. The good parts. Thank you, Dr. Marsh, for everything. Don't thank me. Just go be who you are, somewhere that deserves it. I hung up, looked out the window. A June night. Crickets in full voice below. A thin moon curved like a closing parenthesis. the neighbor's porch light casting a yellow square on the sidewalk. Somewhere in this city, Dylan was sleeping soundly. My parents were watching late-night television with the volume too high. Brooke was probably browsing wedding centerpieces on her phone. None of them knew. I set my alarm for 6. I had a family dinner to attend, and then a family to leave. I ran 4 miles Friday morning. Not to clear my head was already clear. I ran because my body needed to catch up to my decision. 6 in the morning. The streets empty except for a man walking a beagle and a kid delivering newspapers on a bicycle who looked like he had traveled here from the 1980s. The air tasted of wet asphalt and fresh-cut grass, the way mornings in these towns do before the heat settles. I ran east, toward the sunrise. Past the gas station where I had my first summer job. Past the high school where I won my first coding competition. Past the library where I had taught myself Python from a book with a cracked spine. This city had raised me, even when my family hadn't. Back at the apartment, I showered, dressed simply, jeans, a clean blouse, flats. No armor, no costume. I didn't need one. Final checks. Transfer confirmation email saved. 11 boxes sealed and labeled. Rental van booked for 6 the next morning. Apartment key on the kitchen counter, ready to leave behind. I slid a USB drive into my jacket pocket. Small, brushed silver, the size of a thumb. On it, a presentation I had built the previous week. Side-by-side code comparison. My original files on the left, timestamps glowing green. Dylan's submissions on the right, timestamps in red. Months later, the same logic, the same structure, different variable names, like a plagiarist who believes changing the font makes it original. The USB wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. In case my family needed to see what I had been looking at for months. I parked behind Dylan's new SUV, graphite gray, financed on a Meridian salary built from my blueprints. Brooke's white sedan was there too. Everyone present. My mother greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted one moment too long. Her magnolia perfume filled the hallway. "I'm so glad you came, sweetheart. I wouldn't have missed it." The dining room was set for 5. Diane's grandmother's china, cream with gold edges, reserved for special occasions. Candles lit. 2 brass candlesticks, the stew at the center of the table surrounded by roasted carrots like a crown. A bottle of red wine from the high shelf that Richard saved for occasions worth remembering. Whatever was about to happen, my parents had decorated for it. Richard sat at the head of the table, jaw set, fingers laced. Diane at his left. Dylan and Brooke across from them. Dylan in a blue button-down, sleeves rolled, relaxed as a man with nothing to hide. Brooke smiled and squeezed my hand when I passed her. She had kind eyes. I almost felt sorry for what was coming. My chair was at the far end of the table, as far from the door as possible. I sat down and unfolded my napkin. Small talk moved around the table like a nervous bird. Brooke mentioned wedding venues. Diane asked about cake flavors. Richard poured the wine with a steady hand, but didn't drink. Dylan ate quickly, eyes on his plate. He knew something was coming too. He just thought it was aimed at me. The stew was good. Thyme and onion, caramelized edges. The kind of cooking my mother did when she wanted the food to say what she couldn't. My father cleared his throat. Just like that, the evening stopped pretending. "Angela," he said. He used the word talk the way some people use a gavel. "Your mother and I need to address something." He straightened in his chair. Shoulders squared. This was not a conversation. It was a sentencing. "Your brother has expressed concern that you've been distant, cold, unsupportive of his achievements." I looked at Dylan. He had the decency to lower his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he lifted his chin and arranged his face into something wounded and sincere. "I just want my sister back," he said, his voice cracking on cue. "I miss who she used to be." A performance so polished it should have had an intermission. Diane reached across and squeezed his hand. "He's really been affected, Angela." Richard continued. "Your brother has done nothing but make this family proud. He's worked hard, built a career, found a wonderful partner." A glance at Brooke, then back to me. "And you sit there with that attitude." Then my mother leaned forward, the soft voice, the whisper of guilt she had perfected over decades. "Sweetheart, we're not asking much. Just apologize. Clear the air, so we can all move forward as a family. Apologize. For what exactly? I asked. Richard didn't blink. For your behavior. Your jealousy. For making your brother feel unwelcome in his own family. He reached for his wine. And until you do, your mother and I have decided to suspend our contribution to your tuition. For your own good. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Brooke looked at her plate. Diane nodded with red eyes, loyal to the script. Richard pressed his lips together in anticipation. They wanted one word from me. An apology. They got one word. Just not the one they expected. I placed my knife and fork on the table, parallel, the way Diane had taught me. I looked at each of them in turn. I breathed. All right, I said. Richard's shoulders dropped. A satisfied smile began to form on his face. The smile of a man when the world bends his way. Dylan exhaled and touched his chest. Diane leaned back, vindicated. They thought I was surrendering. I pushed back my chair and stood up. All right, I repeated. You can keep the tuition. I don't need it anymore. The smile on Richard's face didn't disappear. It froze, like a clock stopping between two ticks. Diane blinked. What do you mean you don't need it? I've been accepted for a transfer to a university in Washington, D.C. on full academic merit. I confirmed my enrollment 2 days ago. Nobody moved. The candles kept burning. What? Richard's voice had lost its gavel. Dylan's face went white. Not gradually. All at once, like someone had pulled a plug. Angela, you can't just... You didn't even tell us. You never asked. Brooke's fork slipped from her fingers and rang against the china. She didn't pick it up. Dylan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His eyes moved from confident to calculating to something I had never seen on his face before. Fear. Angela, he said slowly. Let's talk. Let's talk about this. Yes, I said and sat back down. Let's. My father's smile had not disappeared yet, but it was about to. The algorithm, I said, keeping my voice conversational, the way you discuss the weather. The one you're presenting to Meridian's board of directors. The one you've been calling yours for 6 years. The dining room became a vacuum. Brooke looked at Dylan. Diane looked at Richard. Richard looked at me. Dylan tried to laugh. It came out like a cough. Angela, come on, you're being... I sent the documentation this morning. I folded my hands on the table. To Meridian's corporate compliance office and to the Academic Integrity Committee of your graduate university. Imagine this. A dining room. 6 candles burning over a table. 5 people. And a lie that has just lost its legs. Dylan grabbed the back of his chair. His knuckles were white. Please tell me you didn't send it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Richard leaned forward, the engineer in him detecting a structural failure. Send what? Dylan, what is she talking about? Dylan said nothing. For the first time in 27 years, the golden child had no script. I reached into my bag and placed my laptop on the table between the stew and the wine. I opened the presentation. 2 columns filled the screen. Left side, my code. My timestamps. My name. Right side, Dylan's submissions. Months later, the same architecture. Dad, your son has been submitting my code as his own for 6 years. Every promotion, every bonus, the trajectory toward vice president, all of it built on mine. Richard stared at the screen. His mouth opened. No sound came out. My father stopped smiling, and for the first time in 22 years the room was listening to me. Dylan tried the only move he had left. He tried to become the victim. She's lying. She always resented me. This is some kind of revenge fantasy. She probably falsified those timestamps. I didn't argue. I turned the laptop to face him directly. Explain the recursive optimization layer, Dylan. Right now. Walk us through it. Silence. You told Dad it took you 8 months to develop. Explain how it works. His jaw moved. Nothing came out. Brooke's chair moved first. A slow pushback from the table. No drama. Just a woman putting distance between herself and a stranger. Dylan, she said, her voice very small. Is this true? He looked at her. At his father. at his mother. He found no rescue in any of their faces. His mouth opened, and the lie that came out was so thin you could see through it. It was a collaboration. She helped. Of course she helped, but You called me 3 weeks ago, I said quietly, because you couldn't explain the buffer function in the third loop. The code you claimed to have written. You didn't understand it, Dylan. Because you didn't write it. Brooke stood up. She didn't push her chair, didn't cry. She picked up her handbag from the sideboard, said, "Excuse me," and walked out the front door. The latch clicked behind her. Soft. Definitive. Diane buried her face in her hands. The sound she made was not quite crying. It was the sound of a story collapsing. "Angela," she whispered, "why didn't you tell me?" "I told you 100 times, Mom. Every time you said family helps each other." "I didn't know it was this much." "You didn't want to know." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said what I had been waiting for, the thing she had clearly worked up to asking all evening. "Angela, is there any way to withdraw the complaint?" "For the family. Your father co-signed Dylan's mortgage. If Dylan loses his income, your father is responsible for $350,000 of his retirement." I closed my eyes. Let the numbers land. Richard Adams, 54. Fixed income. Co-signing a mortgage for a son whose salary had been built on stolen blueprints. The house of cards was coming all the way down. "Mom, I love you. But I am not going to set myself on fire to keep Dylan warm. Not anymore." "Angela, tell Dad I'm sorry about the mortgage. Truly. But Dylan signed that loan with a salary he didn't earn. That's between him, Dad, and Meridian." She made a sound somewhere between a sigh and a swallow. "You are such a sweet girl," she whispered. "I still am, Mom. I'm just not a quiet one anymore." She hung up without saying goodbye. I understood. Some goodbyes take longer than a phone call. The email from the Academic Integrity Committee arrived while I was studying for my first midterm at my new university. September. The campus had turned gold and red overnight, the way DC does when autumn arrives fast. I was in the library, third floor, the quiet section near the east windows. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. The sender was the graduate school Dylan had attended. After thorough review of the evidence submitted, including code comparison analysis, access records, and expert testimony, the committee has concluded that Mr. Dylan R. Adams committed substantial violations of the university's academic integrity policy. The Master of Science degree awarded to Mr. Dylan Adams has been formally revoked, effective immediately. Revoked. I read the word twice. It settled on the screen like a stone dropped into still water. 3 words undid 6 years of fiction. Dylan Adams, MS, struck from the record. Through Marcus Webb, I learned that Meridian acted that same week. Once the degree revocation was official, they had no choice. Dylan had been hired and promoted based on credentials that no longer existed. Formal termination. Their legal team had also begun proceedings to recover $110,000 in performance bonuses paid under false pretenses. Students moved around me in the library, turning pages, writing papers, drinking coffee from thermoses. Normal life. The world didn't stop to acknowledge that a man's career had just dissolved. It simply continued. I put my phone down, picked up my highlighter, and went back to Chapter 7. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel empty either. I felt like someone who had finally put down a very heavy bag after carrying it up a very long staircase, and could now simply set it on the floor. My father never said I'm sorry in 54 years of living. I know because I had been counting. The call came on a Sunday afternoon in October. I was walking back to the library, backpack heavy with textbooks, the DC air cool and clear the way it gets just before the clocks change. Angela. Just my name. No authority. No gavel. Just a tired man holding a phone. "Hi, Dad. I need you to understand something." I didn't know the extent of what was happening. "Dad, you didn't know because you didn't want to look." He was quiet. I heard him breathe, a long, slow inhalation. The breath a man takes when the foundation he built his life on has shifted. Not cracked. Shifted. Which is worse, because you can repair a crack. Shifted foundations mean nothing was level from the beginning. I raised him to be, he stopped. The word successful hung in the air, unsaid. Its funeral too recent for an elegy. You raised him to believe he could take whatever he wanted, I said. And you raised me to believe I should let him. Another long silence. Long enough for a streetlight to flicker on above me, casting orange light on the sidewalk. I'm sorry, Angela. 2 words. From a man who had built walls his entire life and had just watched the last one fall. Thank you, Dad. I meant it. But an apology doesn't give back 6 years, and it doesn't give Dylan back his integrity. That was his to keep, and he chose not to. I softened then because the anger was no longer the point. Take care of yourself, Dad. Take care of Mom. I hung up. The autumn wind took the rest of the conversation down the empty street. I didn't forgive him that day, but I didn't hate him either. I simply let the thread go quiet and kept walking forward. I didn't expect to hear from Brooke, but I hadn't expected many things that summer. The message came in November, a month after Richard's call. Short, direct, no emojis. Angela, I know we were never very close, but I wanted you to know I left Dylan, not because of what you did, but because of what he did. I've been going back over every conversation, every time he talked about his work, every time he'd get that irritated look when I asked technical questions, like I was too simple to understand. Turns out I was asking exactly the right questions. He just didn't have the answers. I sat on my bed, the phone screen bright in the dark. My roommate's breathing was even on the other side of the room. Outside, a tree branch tapped the window like something asking to come in. I typed back, I'm sorry you got caught in this. You deserved better. A pause. Then so did you. 3 words from a woman I had shared exactly 4 Christmas dinners and 2 awkward small talk lunches with. 3 words that landed harder than my mother's tears or my father's apology. I put the phone down and looked at the ceiling. Dylan hadn't just stolen my code. He had stolen Brooke's trust, my parents' pride, his own future. He had taken everything good within reach and hollowed it out from the inside, the way termites work. You don't see the damage until someone leans against the wall, and it gives. My new advisor, Dr. Helena Torres, sharp, middle-aged, silver rings on every finger, specializing in computational ethics, had read my paper before I set foot in her office. Dr. Marsh had sent it ahead as a letter of introduction. Angela, this algorithm isn't just technically sound, she said, tapping the printout on her desk. It's thoughtful. The self-correction mechanism has an elegance that most senior researchers never achieve. I sat across from her in a leather chair that smelled of old books and said, Thank you. 2 simple words. But saying them in an office where the person on the other side of the desk actually knew what I had built, that was new. That was oxygen. October became November. I built routines the way I built code. Carefully, intentionally. Coffee at 7 at the cafe on the main street, where the barista drew a leaf in the foam without being asked. Morning runs along the river walk, where rowing teams cut through the mist like whispered punctuation. Lab hours from 3 to 9. Teaching assistant for an undergraduate section on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. 21st-year students who called me Miss Adams and raised their hands when I asked questions. I did not contact my family. Not from bitterness. There was simply nothing to say that didn't sound like either a peace offering or a victory lap. I left the door unlocked. I just didn't open it. Boundaries, not barriers. A year is a long time. Long enough for a lie to die, a career to dissolve, and a girl to become who she was always supposed to be. By the following June, the scoreboard had updated itself quietly. My side, a 4.0 in my first year at the new university. A paper published in a peer-reviewed journal. A summer research fellowship at an AI lab that had accepted 12 applicants from a pool of 200. A desk by a window. A name that people recognized when I walked into a room. Dylan's side, terminated from Meridian Technologies. Master of Science degree officially revoked. Civil lawsuit pending. Living in the spare bedroom of my parents' house. Applying for jobs that didn't require explaining a 6-year gap built on credentials he no longer possessed. Richard making monthly payments on a mortgage he had co-signed for a house Dylan could no longer afford. $800 a month from a retiree's pension. I did not celebrate. I noted it and moved on. My mother had started therapy. I found out not from her, but from a card that arrived at my campus mailbox in May. 3 lines in her careful cursive on cream paper that smelled faintly of magnolia. I am learning. It's hard. I miss you. I held the card for a long time. Her handwriting had become slightly more trembling. The G in learning wobbled at the bottom. The O at the end of hard faded, as if she had run out of breath by the end of the word. I put the card in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to respond, but I wasn't ready to throw it away either. In my experience, forgiveness is not a gift you give someone else. It is a door you open when you are ready to walk through it, not when they knock. The first time I saw my name on a published article, I didn't cry. I just read it 3 times to make sure it was real. The journal was well regarded, widely cited in the field. The kind of publication that opens doors for serious researchers. And there on the first page, in 12-point Times New Roman, Adams. The algorithm had evolved. What had started as an adaptive optimization framework in a blinking lab at a state university had grown into something more, a self-correction system with applications in health data processing, predictive modeling, environmental analysis. I had taken the seed Dylan had stolen and grown a forest he could never claim. Dr. Torres read the acceptance notification over my shoulder and pressed my arm. This is going to open many doors, Angela. Many. That afternoon, I printed a copy, held the pages up to my desk lamp, and watched the light shine through the paper. My name. My work. No one else's fingerprints. An email from Dr. Marsh arrived at 10:14 that night. Subject line blank. Body. I told you so. I laughed out loud in my empty dorm room at 10:14 on a Tuesday night. The kind of laugh you save for the people who believed in you before you believed in yourself. I framed the first page. Small frame, no pretension, dark wood, glass front. I put it on my desk beside the only photograph I had brought from home. My grandmother, standing in the garden beside the magnolia tree, squinting in the sun, smiling like she knew something nobody else did. 2 women who had seen me. One by blood, one by choice. Adams. My name. My work. Finally only mine. Some afternoons, when the city lights came on and my dorm window glowed like a slot in an advent calendar, I sat on the courtyard bench and let the silence settle around me. I was no longer angry. I was free. Some families teach you how to love. Mine taught me how to leave. And leaving turned out to be the most loving thing I ever did for myself. I did not destroy Dylan. I simply stopped building the ground he was standing on. And when I stopped, the ground he had built on fiction found its own level. Gravity did the rest. The Potomac moved slow and steady below the bench during my June afternoons, carrying pollen and reflected clouds toward the bay. A rowing shell cut the current in the distance, the oars dipping and rising in a rhythm so clean it looked like breathing. My laptop open on my knees. New code running on the screen. A new project. Something that existed entirely in a space Dylan had never touched. A problem nobody had asked me to solve. I was solving it because I could, because it mattered, because this was what work felt like when it wasn't stolen or dismissed or drowned out at a dinner table. I thought about Dylan at 10 years old, building block towers in the living room. There. Now, it'll hold. He had known how to build things once. Somewhere along the way, he had decided it was easier to take. I didn't hate him. Hating someone is just another way of staying in the room with them. And I had already walked out. I don't know if my family will ever heal. I don't know if Dylan will ever take real responsibility. I don't know if my mother will ever choose the difficult truth over the comfortable story. What I know is this: I am not responsible for their choices. Only for mine. The sun was setting in purple and orange, painting the river in colors that looked like a fresh start. I chose myself. I finally, fully chose myself. I stood up, slung my backpack over one shoulder, and walked toward campus. The evening air was warm. The path was lit. My steps were light. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped building his floor.